Shut up and sit down.
Welcome once again to the Shite Talk podcast show. I'm your host Mark Kearns with you on episode 107, and I returned this week with an MMA show, and there's been a good few MMA stories that popped up throughout the week and over the weeks in the MMA news cycle that I thought would be a good time to sit down and talk about a few of them. And today we have everything from a possible Frankie Edgar versus Conor McGregor fight to Anthony Johnson return, this time at heavyweight, to Paige Van Zandt wanting more money from the UFC. And we will get into all of that and more. I'm actually going to start off with James Haskell. He's a former England international and retired only this year from rugby at age 37. Decided that, you know what, I think I'm going to leave down rugby boots and start DJing. He has been DJing in Ibiza, and I think it was even also signed up to I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. But between that and now, he has decided that he also wants to throw on being a professional fighter onto that frying pan that's already quite full. Apparently it was Bellator that reached out to James in order to, if you would be interested in stepping into the octagon, or I guess the cage. I don't think it's quite an octagon shape in Bellator, and try his hand at professional fighting. At first he thought it was just maybe a commentary role, which he's done commentary before, but instead they actually wanted him to fight. And after thinking about it for a bit, he decided, yeah, fuck it, I'll do it. And yeah, well, a little bit of back history on James Haskell's fighting career. He actually did train in London Shoe Fighters and continues to train there leading up to his debut with Bellator. He said it kind of helped him with his learning how to tackle. It was good kind of supplement training other than the stuff that he was getting from obviously being a professional rugby player, and it helped him in his rugby career, he felt. As well as that, he's also going to go on to say that he's going to take it seriously, that he thinks if he goes out and looks like Freddie Flintoff did when he tried his hand at boxing, he said he'd be fucking embarrassed. So I think that's a slight little dig to Frankie as well. And yeah, I think in terms of, like, we've seen this throughout MMA, we've seen guys, boxers, professional wrestlers, even in the UFC as late, we've seen a few rugby players try their hands at the sport, at mixed martial arts, and not to the same level that James Haskell has played rugby. I think the only other person I can think offhand is Alexander Volkanov from featherweight. I think he's from Australia, and he has he's played a bit of rugby. I don't know. He definitely hasn't played to the extent that James Haskell have, and all the international caps James has in kind of rugby for England, and at the level that he played as well, to then transition into it. But it's a kind of nice story, I thought, because once the Rugby World Cup is just around the corner, James will be over in Japan for the World Cup just to support the lads. He had brought them out on a pre-season and strength and conditioning workout just before they headed off. He was saying on Sky Sports. So I think it was really, really interesting. He's going to debut as a heavyweight in Bellator. Bellator has given a lot of fighters in Europe their debuts as of late and going forward. I know there's a few from Dublin that are, when they come over here, that are going to be getting their debut fights for Bellator. So they really are trying to target that European audience by building their base full of European fighters and trying to get a stranglehold on the European scene as of late, which is really good for European fighters, because the UFC's kind of been neglecting it as of late. So it's prime time for another company to go over there and take over. We had over here we had the Polish one, KSW, come over from, but they've never really managed to break into the European scene. They have a few shows over in London, one in Dublin, but never to the same extent of success that they had over in Poland, where it was just their strong home, their home of their sport. Also trying to make his heavyweight debut and UFC return is Anthony Johnson, who was a former light heavyweight. I think he fought twice for the light heavyweight against DC. Had a very close fight against him. Bet Alexander Gustafsson in Sweden, and really sussed the crowd when Alexander was very hot property. Then really quieted the storm of that. It was kind of unfortunate. There was like a clash of heads and Alexander came worse off. But I think up until that point, he looked huge. He started his career, he's such a specimen of a human being, Anthony Johnson. He started out as a welterweight. He used to be able to cut welterweight. He used to cut massive amount of welterweight. Then felt like, fuck it, I'm not doing this anymore. And moved up to light heavyweight, where he looked giant for a light heavyweight. He looked like he could make heavyweight no bother. And has just ran through the division, knocking out lads left, right, and centre, and was kind of a poster boy for why you don't need to cut a massive amount of weight, where you can fight a more natural way or even above a weight and be hugely successful. And really, it was really one of the fighters to start a trend of people going up a weight instead of just down. Like I said, fought for DC for the title, but Alexander was in talks of fighting John Jones before John Jones got pulled off. And then, after losing to DC, I think a second time, he felt like, I need a break from the sport. It didn't look like he was going to come back. It looked like he was kind of set for retirement. He set up his own medical cannabis factory. Seemed happy enough in retirement. It seemed like when he was leaving the sport that he was kind of, he was done with. He was done with for. He's been there, done that. Have the t-shirt kind of thing. He felt a bit delusional of the sport. Didn't feel like he was getting enough as a fighter. There's a lot of other problems there going on. He didn't seem happy fighting, and he thought, great, he segued off into a successful career, hopefully. And you now can put your full energy into something else. I think he was an American footballer before this. I think he played in college or at some kind of level before this. Absolutely free athlete, Anthony Johnson. And now going to come back in heavy. And he comes back at a really, really nice time. I know DC's career is up in the air right now, whether he comes back for one more fight and fights Stipe. I know teammates like Khabib have said that he hopes he retires. His kids want him to retire. I do think it is a nice way for DC just to segue out of the sport. The only really extra they need, he probably, maybe in his back of his head, he would want to fight would be maybe John Jones, just to have one more crack at him to see if he could beat him at light heavyweight. But even at that, he doesn't need to beat John Jones. I don't think. He needs to have that feather cap. He already has 2 titles. He was already dominant in 2 different divisions. I think it is time for him maybe to hang up the boots. So that leaves the title picture for the heavyweight. Although Stipe is there and he's a massive name, he needs a fresh blood into the division. And Anthony Johnson, especially by the look of him, he's absolutely jacked. It seems like, other than the cannabis factory, he's been hitting the fucking gym like a madman. And he does look huge. So he does look like he is proper size for a heavyweight. And I think even if John Jones was thinking about going up, he'll see Anthony Johnson and just say, nah, I'm happy in like heavyweight here. I am not dealing with that. Because John Jones, although he did get jacked when he went weightlifting for a bit when he was suspended, I don't know, his coaches don't seem to think that size suits John Jones. I think the bigger the better for Anthony Johnson. He'll just knock fools out. He just has that power, and that's what you need at heavyweight, and he's got that in abundance. So I can't wait to see his debut. He is targeting possible fight against Alistair Overeem, which really interests me, and Junior Dos Santos as well. So he's really going up for the top 5 division and possibly line himself maybe in 2 fights time with a heavyweight heavyweight fight against Stipe if Stipe is still the champ when he does so. Also, is another kind of weird story. I kind of clicked on this real kind of clickbait, and it said coach says Conor McGregor turned down fights against Frankie, and it's kind of like, okay, is this John Kavanagh saying this? Because that's big. That's John showing shots, or is it Frankie Edgar's coach, Mark Hamill, saying this? And it ended up being a post about how Conor McGregor was given an ESP interview and saying that on the top of his list of fighters that a long list of fighters that he wants to have a fight against, Frankie Edgar being just that he was always really nice, really professional towards him, and that he just thinks he's a legend of the sport, and that he would love that fight. He'd be up on his top of his fight. Conor McGregor's been calling out everybody, might I say, ever since he punched that old man. It's really got his mojo going back in order for him to get back in fighting. Just punching that guy, and now he suddenly wants to fight everyone. He's been calling out likes of Khabib. He's called him several times. Nate Diaz, he's called him out. He's Frankie Edgar, he's now called him out. I'm surprised he hasn't called out Max Holloway or basically the entire lightweight division at this stage. But anybody that he could have possibly had a match with, he's now going through. He writes them down and goes, I think he's always been really good at lining up fights in the past. That Nate Diaz is just like a ace in his sleeve for him. He just keeps in the back that he knows this is a Money Day fight that he can call on anytime. He also has that Aldo fight that he can call on if he wants. He has, like I say, he wants the Khabib fight, whether he gets it or not is something different. And pretty much anyone in the top 5 lightweight, he could have Tony Ferguson if he wanted. He could have Dustin Poirier after Khabib fights him. He could have anybody he wants. He knows this, and he's always very good. So this is a good video. Kind of McGregor throwing out shots into the dark and seeing if anyone responds. Well, Frankie did respond and say that he's 100% interested in fighting Conor McGregor. Frankie Edgar is now 37 and was eyeing up his next fight being at bantamweight. So that might be interesting of where do they fight, because Conor McGregor's coach said after he won the featherweight title that would be the last time he fights at 145 pounds. Conor's a huge 145 pounder. Really, natural weight is at lightweight, and maybe even kind of 165 division would suit Conor McGregor the best. That's where he would lie between 155 and 165 would be his kind of natural fighting weight. Whereas Frankie could fight probably feather, but could cut down equally to bantamweight and wouldn't be that big of a problem for him. So if they fight a feather, you're getting a really depleted Conor, even though he can make that weight. You've seen him make it before. Or you get a really kind of big Conor and small Frankie. So where that fight happens, we're really interested if it does happen. One of the reasons why Conor, other than he respects Frankie, is because he believes that Conor has a very similar style to Khabib, and says he wants to just match himself up with, in his return, a similar fight like Khabib, and that's another one of the reasons why he wants to fight him. So whether, I really do think for Conor, he could be smart and he could say, I want to fight at lightweight. He's fought at lightweight before, and give himself a huge advantage. But even if the fight happens at featherweight, remember, Frankie Edgar's eyeing up a bantamweight turn, so he's not going to stop everything he's doing with a possibility of Conor McGregor, who hasn't fought in probably, is it 2 years now? So we don't really know what if Conor is serious about this. So Frankie's going to keep trying to make bantamweight, trying to get that fight happens, and if Conor McGregor happens, it happens. But if it does happen like that, he's going to be really small for featherweight, because he's going to have to change the way he's eating. He's going to drop a lot of weight for that fight. So Frankie's going to be trying to put on more weight, whereas Conor's going to cut down. So it's not going to be a great time for Frankie. Whereas I think if he was fighting Conor McGregor in 3 months' time, he'd be kind of bulking up now and then cutting down closer to the fight trying to give himself, trying to match that, trying to diminish the strength advantage that Conor McGregor would have over Frankie. Because like he's already given up age. I think there could be 6 years between Frankie and Conor. Like Frankie to be fighting at the top level still is phenomenal at 37. And then they also give him a strength and height advantage. It would be a lot. So this fight for Frankie doesn't actually stack up to overly best. And maybe if he is dropping down the bantamweight, Conor seems like an open goal. And at least Frankie Edgar's coach Mark Hamill might also say why Conor might like an open goal, because he kind of put Conor on blast in a recent interview on Eurobash on MMA fighting, saying that when Aldo was injured at UFC 189, he knew Mendes wasn't in camp. Mendes was filming a hunting show, and that he hadn't actually been training while he was shooting that hunting show. And Frankie, like, he trains all year round, so Frankie's always in shape. He was actually ahead of Chad Mendes and wanted that fight as well. But when given the options between fighting Frankie Edgar and Chad Mendes, Conor picked Mendes, namely because Mendes had just lost to Aldo, and Frankie had won his more fights than Chad Mendes too. He also said they switched Chad and Frankie Edgar around on the rankings to suit the promo of the fights as well, saying Frankie was ranked ahead of Chad and should have got the title because Chad had just fought Aldo and lost. So that means if they were trying to do a number one contender, so interim title shot, should have been Frankie, who would have been the next in line after Chad, since Chad had just lost. And kind of putting on blast, saying why either the UFC was protecting Conor or Conor was protecting himself, saying that he knew Chad was out of camp, he was shooting a hunting show, and that he hadn't been training while Frankie Edgar was. So it's kind of just putting him on blast, and also kind of stoking the fire of the fact that this could be a possible fight, getting a bit of heat for why this fight should go ahead as well, which he actually is quite good on, because Frankie Edgar is quite a nice guy. He doesn't go around like really trash talking a whole lot. And you kind of just see every now and again Mark Hamill coming in and talking a bit of trash on the behalf of Frankie Edgar, trying to like get him interesting fights. He did it for when he was going down to bantamweight. Frankie Edgar was, I'll see what happens, I don't know. Mark was like, yeah, this is definitely have to be for a title fight, or else he's not happening. Is either a bantamweight title fight or nothing. And like then there was rumors from becoming like possibly an interim kind of title fight, or kind of number one contender title fight for Frankie if he did drop down the bantamweight. So he is usually pretty good at getting Frankie's name into the publicity and kind of giving him a push that Frankie maybe not feel comfortable being the brash talker that he is. Quite like he's just a respectful guy. Goes about his business the way he does, and just doesn't want to be the person stirring shit. Leaves us talking for in the cage, which is respectable about him. I think we need fighters like that. I do think we need kind of antagonists, and we need kind of good guys. You kind of need that push and balance. As everyone's talking shit, the sport gets a bad name. But if you have the really respectful, soft talking people who like are the ones that's so passionate about fighting and don't want to talk shit, and then we have the brash talkers, that kind of clash will create animosity, and that's where you get tension and big fights, I think. So for Mark Hamill, just to push kind of Frankie into the situation by taking interviews like on Eurobass and just letting fans know, oh, Conor McGregor turned down fights before on us, and obviously you get clickbait articles that I then click into and talk about shite on my podcast about it helps Frankie Edgar out in the long term. Anyway, talking shit, the next guy I'm going to talk about has made an absolute career about it and still does, because he put the flyweight division on blast. Chael Sonnen hasn't been a big proponent of the flyweight division, has constantly bashed it, and has been arguing why it should not be around. And once again, on his YouTube channel, he put the flyweight division, the 125-pound division, on blast again, saying that they basically haven't learned their lesson, that if it wasn't for Henry Cejudo, that division was gone. And it was very close to being stopped. Basically what happened was, like, Henry Cejudo bet Demetrius Johnson in a very, very close fight, which I thought, like, Johnson won, but I am a massive fan of Demetrius Johnson. And then they sold Demetrius Johnson to ONE FC, and then let off a huge amount of fighters, cleared out the majority of their 125-pound male division, and it was looking like they're going to fold the division. And what Cejudo did was say, I'll take the fight against TJ Dillashaw, the one that they're trying to make for Demetrius Johnson versus TJ. What Demetrius Johnson wanted was for TJ to fight at flyweight and to prove that he could make the weight, then fight him for the title. It would have proved that, like, TJ probably shouldn't have fought at flyweight. It really didn't suit him. Ended up getting knocked out, and then they then popped for performance enhancers, and then you had Cejudo go up and become a double champ. So that's why we're in a situation. And from here, Cejudo has really adopted kind of professional wrestling of being a heel, being a bad guy. He is put on this, like, a ring attire, king attire, has called himself the Triple C, and really gone for the heel and generated himself a lot of publicity in the meantime doing so, and really put the division kind of as the poster boy, at least anyway as bantamweight division. He's kind of really been the poster boy for that, as TJ kind of seeps off into the kind of distance of being suspended. You haven't heard too much from Cody, and like the flyweight division, you don't hear anything from anybody. And I think that's what Chael Sonnen's big gripe was like, hey guys, like, you were nearly extinct if it wasn't for Cejudo, like, putting any publicity, and nobody can call him out, nobody can make anything from this. Nobody's even trying to, like, set up a fight between him and Cejudo. Cejudo has to do all the work. Like, cop on to yourselves, like, make somebody call them out. Like, even have likes of Joseph Benavidez, who has a win over Henry Cejudo, being pretty quiet. And I do agree with him on that part. Like, what the UFC kind of shot them in the foot, and they've done it with the flyweight division for a while, where they put them on the bottom of the cards, and from the bottom of the cards they expect fans to know about them, instead of, like, putting the flyweight division and just doing what they did with the women's bantamweight division, which was, like, kind of tie it in with the middleweight division, where every time the middleweight title was being defended, the women's bantamweight title was defended on the same card. And they're putting it in with a name. So if they did the same thing, anytime Robert Whittaker was fighting, you'd have Henry Cejudo fight in a flyweight, like Joseph Benavidez. It gets eyeballs at the flyweight division, so at least they know contenders who are fighting. They might know them coming up, they see them on the cards, and then if they had fighters from the flyweight division who are on main cards and smaller cards, they would at least know the roster a little bit. But instead they're scoffed off to the prelims of, like, these local cards that no one really watches. So no one's definitely going to watch the prelims unless you're a really hardcore fan who watches fucking everything, or it's your job to watch the fucking the previews because you're going to be writing articles about it. And so the UFC really hasn't done nothing to kind of help the men's flyweight division. But it is true, you have to agree with Chael Sonnen in saying that the flyweights themselves haven't done nothing to help their position either. And if nobody's promoting, of course division isn't going to go anywhere. That's the same with the featherweight division before Conor McGregor got there, or Max Holloway. That's the same with the lightweight division before, like, you could say Benson Henderson was the champion. No one was there or thereabouts. It wasn't really a huge property. It was just, it was always just in the background of other divisions until they got, like, a face for the division. Then you can't kind of can't make fights off if you don't have anyone promoting it. And then what you do, even worse than that, you sell off arguably your hero, your good guy of this story, Demetrius Johnson, a guy who a lot of his fans think he was robbed of a decision against Henry Cejudo. So Henry Cejudo goes and does the double champ thing, and you have the opportunity now to bring back Demetrius Johnson as his ultimate hero at flyweight to fight Henry Cejudo, and that would make the division absolutely massive again. Obviously, there would be like implications with ONE FC. Maybe do cross promotion. Am I talking up my hole? Because UFC could lose the flyweight division. But even if Demetrius Johnson beats Henry Cejudo, end the flyweight division, then just say fine. Demetrius Johnson won. He goes back to ONE FC. He did his cross promotion thing. We lost. We put all our chips on this guy. We still have a bantamweight champion. The flyweight division was kind of like, there, but you end it there. If Henry Cejudo then goes and beats Demetrius Johnson for again, you have a huge star. You have a huge pay-per-view. And with flyweights. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think they'll do a cross promotion, but I think that's what they should do. They should cross promotion right now. The next fight should, but Joseph Benavidez kind of does deserve a title shot. If Joseph loses, next pay-per-view should be Demetrius Johnson, the ONE FC champion, versus Henry Cejudo, the UFC double champion, and it would make a fucking huge pay-per-view. Suddenly people will be interested in this cross-promotion champion versus champion match, and if Johnson loses, this wins, you just end the flyweight division. You just fine. He deserves the belt. He is one of the greatest of all time. He is a Hall of Famer down the line. I'm happy enough. End the division there with Johnson having the belt, and you just close it off. ONE FC gets a huge champion now. It has a UFC champion coming to the division and a ONE FC champion. Ended the flyweight division. They get a big push for it. The UFC get like a big pay-per-view out of it. They weren't going to use the flyweight division. It isn't a huge loss for the male flyweight division. And suddenly, then you only have the bantamweight. And it might hurt the bantamweight in saying that, because then you have a champion by another promotion beats their champion. We could just say it was that lighter weight. I think that's should be the game plan. Paige Van Zandt wants more money. The reason she wants to make more money is because she makes more money on Instagram than she does fighting in the UFC. The UFC has turned into Paige Van Zandt's side hustle pretty much, other than posting photos from her house on Instagram. The money that she makes off advertising on Instagram makes Paige Van Zandt more money than her fighting. In her last 5 fights, she's won all her last 5 fights and has 4 finishes in MMA, and believes that she should be on more money. And in her last contract talks, the reason why the UFC didn't want to give her more money is because they said that they couldn't pay her more than the women's champion. Her argument is, why is it just the women's champion? Why are you just comparing me to women's champion? Shouldn't I be seen as equal? And if I can bring in more money, then I should get the same amount as someone who brings in equal amount of money. She also said generally the pay should increase for fighters. That isn't just for herself. That she thinks by and large that UFC fighters are on less money, and this was being kind of a red button topic for a lot of fighters, and has even resulted in lawsuits towards the UFC and fighters is refusing to fight for the UFC and return. Brendan Schaub would be like one of the examples of that. Just said, nah, after the Reebok deal came in, I make way too much money on sponsorship deals that like I'm not going to give up that, and basically left mixed martial arts behind. And Paige Van Zandt has only one more fight on her contract, so she's going to fight out her contract before going into negotiations. One of the big problems is you have to be willing to leave in order to get more money. Like, unless you have a reason why the UFC has to give you more money, then you can't expect more money. Whether that means she'll fire her contract and try her look at Bellator or ONE FC or even Invicta, and seeing if they can offer her more money and then using that as a bargain chip. But equally, she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to actually fight anymore. She could go to the Ronda Rousey route and go into professional wrestling. She definitely could make a name for herself as a professional wrestler. We've seen Ronda Rousey cross over quite successfully. Equally as such, she's a brilliant dancer. She could make herself as a host for TV. She could do a lot of things with her career. She is still very, very young, and she doesn't really need to be punched in the face to make a living. So unless the UFC makes it financially lucrative for her, you could see her just walk away from the UFC altogether and explore her interests outside mixed martial arts. So this is going to be really interesting to see who the UFC puts against for her next fight, and what kind of conditions they'll make for it. Because ideally, what you want, Paige Van Zandt is going to want more money than likes of Amanda Nunes or any of the other female women's champions are on. Now, they could just turn around and do what they do with Conor McGregor and just say, if someone can bring in this much money from social media, we'll give them the same amount of money, or if someone can get this much media traffic, then we'll give them that much money. But until you can be as lucrative as Paige Van Zandt is for the UFC, we can't pay you. So maybe they do go down that kind of line. It'd be really interesting. The UFC aren't easy to negotiate with. They will kind of hardball people, and they don't mind cutting their nose to spite their face. It'll be really interesting to see. They generally, if fighters are looking for an out to give them a really hard fight, to kind of like to put them on a loss. So it kind of takes the sheen away from them. And if they win, then they're kind of like, all right, give them what they want. So it'll be kind of interesting what Paige does, or what Paige's next fight will be for her fight. I don't actually have when she's expected back in the octagon. I know she was returning from surgery there for a while. So it'll be interesting to see when she does fight. It should be this year. She should be able to fight this year. But who she's going to be fighting against and all the other details, I'm not too sure about. We actually have 142, UFC 142 is happening on September 7th of September. And yeah, pretty good card. We have Edson Barboza fighting Paul Felder, which will be a brilliant co-main event. We also have Khabib fighting Dustin Poirier in the main event. So this is a fight that will set up and secure the lightweight division. We now have an interim champ, which I didn't think we needed. We also have Khabib come back. So the fact that there has only been a few months between when the interim title will happen and the kind of Khabib being crowned the actual champion, we didn't need an interim champion, and it didn't really mean that because we've seen other interim champions from the same division be bylocked. But at least then we've secured a lightweight champion. Bar being Khabib goes and starts a brawl with someone from Dustin's team, or maybe Nate Diaz, as he nearly did in the audience a while ago. We won't have any suspensions. The lightweight championship will have a champion who can fight in a few months' time, and we can start lining up fighters for him to fight, like the aforementioned Tony Ferguson, possibly building from this Edson Barboza fight, and then we can see where Conor McGregor fits in the mix as well. In terms of like what I think for the fight, fighting Edson Barboza and Paul Felder, it's going to be really, really interesting. But Edson Barboza kicks super hard, has great striking. Paul Felder loves to fight, loves getting to a scrap, and I think that's what Paul Felder will have to do. He'll have to do a lot of dirty boxing, fight into the pocket. You can't give Barboza any space, because Barboza will take your head off with those kicks. So that's going to be interesting, really aggressive fight. And then for Dustin Poirier versus Khabib, it will be really interesting, especially early on, while they're not as sweaty, to see what Khabib does. Does he strike with him for a bit, or does Khabib just take him down straight away and dominate him as Khabib does? This is because as they're going into this fight, especially when Dustin is dry, when he's not sweating, he's going to be easier to hold down, get a lot of punching. Khabib will be looking to dominate him. But as the fight goes on, after get more sweaty, Dustin will be still there, I think, in the third round. And when we traditionally see Khabib maybe find it harder to hold people down because of the sweats, if he doesn't break him mentally, that is, which I wouldn't say Dustin Poirier will be. And as the fight goes into the fourth and fifth round, it's going to be really interesting. Then this fight comes alive for the likes of Dustin Poirier, and it comes more and more interesting. So that's really, I still think Khabib 27-0 is a huge favourite for this. Dustin Poirier 25-5. A lot of those fights were at flyweight. Although I think he only lost. I think he only lost once at flyweight. I think his only loss was to Conor McGregor at flyweight. So that'll be still really interesting, and he's a completely different fighter since that fight. So that'll be really interesting to see what happens there. And yeah, you see 242 looks pretty good in terms of cards. So I'm gonna leave it there. I'll be back next Thursday. Talk to you then.